Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Lage, and I'm a clinical social worker at the Child Mind Institute. We're a national nonprofit that supports children and families with gold standard mental health care, advice, and resources that is all online and accessible to everyone. During the coronavirus crisis, our telehealth resources include diagnosis and treatment of mental health and learning disorders, 30-minute phone consultations, bereavement and grief support, remote neuropsychological evaluations, and this is just a sample. So please visit childmind.org/telehealth to learn more. Today, I'd like to talk about goals and motivation during COVID-19, and then I'd like to answer your questions on this as well as anything else that you're wondering about. Post your questions in the feed, and we will also post helpful links to resources on the childmind.org site. And remember that we're here every day, and we look through your questions daily. So I'll just dive right into the topic. So we're talking about goals and motivation. I feel like I've been talking about this a lot, not only with clients, but friends, myself. And I think this is a really important topic, especially as, with the times and how things are going, people want to do more of goal setting and, reevaluating their motivation and things like that. So really, what I want to talk about here is not only how you can set your own goals, how you can help your kids with their own goals as well, but doing that during this time of uncertainty. And so, setting goals is hard enough to do when there's not a global pandemic. So, definitely be easy on yourself as you go into this. But, with this time that we're thinking, there's so much more time for me to improve my life. And how can I do that? And I should be doing more of it. But really, those are high expectations for ourselves, especially during this time right now. So really, I think where I want to start with is understanding where your goals are coming from. And I do this with clients as well and others, and just thinking about my own goals. Like, where is this really coming from? Am I thinking about it as it's a reward for myself, or is it a reward for other people if I do well? Is it performance based? Is it, I'm trying to do really well in my job so that I can get noticed by my someone that's, for my boss or the CEO or something like that. But, you really just want to see where is that coming from. So there's sort of intrinsic motivation, and then there's extrinsic. And that's something that you may have heard if you are an educator or if you have talked to your, schools or your kids' educational organizations or things like that about learning and how they learn. Actually, I'm thinking of a study that I read not too long ago just about someone who is, that they're doing a study on whether or not this group is going to develop their cognitive ability versus they're really motivated on this performance. And so then what came out of the study is there was evidence that showed that the long-term sort of goals were really accomplished more so when they were really trying to master it and really had enjoyment in it versus if they were trying to do it for a reward versus, such as a promotion or some sort of monetary reward. So, really, when you're thinking about it, at this time, I think it's best to focus on those goals that really actually will give you some sort of fulfillment and that you are actually enjoyable, because they'll be more likely to get done. And really, we have some questions, which I'm really thankful for, about goal setting, and I'm super excited to dive in because there's a bunch of things that I would love to talk to you about today. So if you have any questions, please do jump in. Right now I have some, and I will go ahead and start. But it looks like before I start with some of our questions that we received before, it looks like we have a question from Loli, and thank you so much for tuning in today. It says, I am a social work educator. What is your favorite self-help book? Wow, this is really hard. This is a really hard question. Thank you for asking this. And, I love to see my fellow social workers. Thank you for joining us. Really, I guess my favorite self-help book I've actually been tuning a little bit more into guides, actually. So I've been following a couple of different meditation guides or spiritual guides or guides that focus more so on sort of interpersonal skills. And there's a lot of guides online that you would be able to find. But I've learned, especially with trying to be in tune and a lot of that mindfulness, which we have great resources on childmind.org if you want to check that out, about mindfulness, but it's really, really amazing as far as that bridge to motivation. And so I've been trying to incorporate this as a bridge to my goals, as far as when I'm doing something, maybe it's a work day, and then I use my mindfulness to then do something that's more so goal related. So that's been helpful for those guides, is doing that and sort of being able to look at it that way. I would say that I've actually been using a lot of apps for this, if that's something that is of interest to you. And really, apps are super helpful for just being on your phone and being accessible. So if that's something that you're interested in, I've seen apps like the Calm app has been really good for not only a resource for myself, but for kids. Another app is something such as the I don't know, really. I'm thinking of the Insight Timer is a great app as well. So if you have any sort of apps or things like that, I think that could be super accessible. And of course, self-help books are amazing. Actually, what I would say is a self-help book that's in disguise is a recipe book. So just like collecting ingredients and things like that can be really helpful. So I don't know if you want to check that out. But I will continue. It looks like we have some other questions as far as goals and motivation. So I appreciate if you are joining us now. My name is Catherine Leach, and I am a clinical social worker at the Child Mind Institute. We're talking about goals and motivation during COVID, and we're really trying to figure out how best to accomplish goals or set realistic goals at this time. So we do have another question. It looks like we have one about screen time, which is a good question. So it says, my daughters and I my daughters are at home and don't go out. Do we minimize their screen time positively, or how to do that? That is I was just talking about expectations, and I think that's where this question kind of lies. At this time, we have some really great resources, by the way, on our website about screen time, and sort of even before COVID, of sort of having to, or just like ideas and sort of things that you can be mindful of as far as screen time in your kids. So I would definitely look into those. The first thing that I would say is the expectations, and creating realistic expectations for yourself and your child or your daughters during this time of how much screen time that is. So, I mean, we have to consider everything, right? FaceTime calls with our family members, FaceTime or Zoom calls for educational purposes. Maybe that time that your kids are just FaceTiming their friends, things of that nature. It's really important that you consider all of these things. So that is sort of the virtual video conferencing side of things. And then you have to think of things such as social media. So that's where I would say, where can you and your daughters compromise as far as screen time and social media? This is a easier time for us to spend a lot more time on social media than we used to. And sometimes it has been helpful. I mean, kids these days definitely get their news from social media. So, something may post about, my mom actually shared something with me that she found on social media that was pretty helpful as far as what I can do as a therapist, and during COVID. And so that's some things where social media can be helpful. But really what we want to understand is when, it's becoming too much. So there definitely can be some signs of, isolation and depression when it comes to the screen time, because and social media specifically, because then we're starting to see people who maybe they are looking like they're living their best lives online. And so how do we do that? And really what I try to do as far as therapeutic practices and interventions, that's where I really want to talk about negative self-talk and, cognitive behavioral therapy skills, where you're really trying to hone in that your thoughts are malleable. But those are just going sort of deeper into that. That's something that you would want to consider. I would think about sort of what are the uses of social media, and then go forward on how you want to, either add, allow and be lenient on this screen time, or if you want to, see if that can be more so of a reward, after the dishes are done, maybe then we can spend more time online. That is social media related, or like more so friend related. It looks like we have another question. So thank you for that last one. Jennifer is asking, how do I find the right therapist online? It always seems awkward to me. I love this question. I do, because I think that it can even be, really daunting during this time when all we have is telehealth. But we have some really great resources on childmind.org. We're actually doing some phone consultations if you want to check that out. If you go on childmind.org/telehealth, we have some great things that you can utilize, and we would be able to sort of help you and guide you, especially if you're looking for a therapist. We have some available, and that would be willing to talk and sort of just finding out what is the best way, especially for your kids. Now, for yourself, it's really important that I think, when you're looking for a therapist online, it's going to, I like the analogy sometimes that my colleagues and I use, that it is sort of like dating. And so you're looking for a specific kind of therapist. So is that, the expertise could be important. So if you want someone who has, experience with parent, sort of like just basically their focus is on parenting and how to work with kids and things like that. That's something that you want to consider. If you're looking for someone who has more experience in depression or trauma, that's the sort of things that you would want to think about. But really, I guess that would be a lot of reflection on yourself. What are you looking for from your therapist? And then that could also even turn into what are some of the, I'm thinking specifically even like, what are sort of your goals? That can also be determined through your search for a therapist. Because if you're looking for, well, I'm looking for a therapist because I am, wanting to set goals for my career or something like that, that can also be a very different therapist. So, it can be awkward, and that is okay. I will say for you, Jennifer, that when you're looking for the right therapist, it may take you one or two or three times, and that I hope you will feel a little bit more so comfortable in going through that journey, because it can be difficult. But nonetheless, it can be sort of a really good way to do some self-reflection, I think, on what you're trying to look for in a therapist. But there's lots of therapists online that you can, or platforms in which you can find therapists, and even one that is in your area so that you feel even a little bit more connected. Thank you for that, Jennifer. We do have another question, and this question is coming from Renee. And so if you're jumping in right now, thank you so much. I do appreciate you joining me. My name is Catherine Liege, and I am a clinical social worker at the Child Mind Institute. Please do check out childmind.org for our telehealth resources. We have some great things that you can check out for parenting needs, mental health, learning disorders, all of that. So please do check us out online. But here's Renee's question. It asked us, any recommendations for teachers to increase motivation in their students, as well as adjusting to the new sort of teaching format? This is a wonderful question, and I actually do work with a lot of educators, and so I've been having this question quite frequently. Really, I start with the teachers, because I'm a big believer in sort of top-down sort of, as far as accomplishing things. I think that the teachers, starting within themselves, have a big impact on how their students are going to be motivated. So this whole idea of like leading by example, really, as the school year is ending, it can be very hard to find yourself even motivated. And really, what I would hope for my educators around the world to do is really break things up. And it's really about what are some of the goals that we can accomplish now. We need to be realistic. And actually, as we're on this topic, as some of my educators may know about SMART goals, I've really been trying to take that a step further as far as what can be done right now. So thinking of something that is measurable and, very achievable, realistic, that is super duper important at this time. So I would say your recommendations is to start with you. How can you make yourself feel motivated? And thinking of maybe even doing those SMART goals for yourself. How can you feel that your goal is achievable, or feeling that you have a more realistic sort of goal? Starting there could be really important for your students to feel that way, especially if you start to help your students feel more motivated. So when you're thinking of, some of those, last or assignments for the school year, considering that there are definitely going to be activities and assignments that are more interesting to some students than the other, I would say variety can help. So even giving students even just a little bit of control on topics, that could be very helpful. So if you're thinking about an essay that's due online or something like that, giving the students some guidance on the structure and how what's supposed to happen there. But really, this is something that you can take and you can sort of be creative with that. But of course, there's some motivation in writing an essay for sure. So even helping them sort of break that down. So how can you break up the assignment into, a whole? I'm thinking about I thought about a teacher who actually, she broke up the assignment. So then in the end, they're really pulling it together. So if that's writing a paragraph on this week about it and really doing a deep dive on what you want to do and write in that paragraph, and then going forward, to the next week, working on the next thing, and then sort of bringing those pieces together at the end can really be helpful for kids not feeling overwhelmed. And that can be really a sort of deterrent of motivation if the student is feeling like they're overwhelmed. So that's something that I would say for teachers is really starting with themselves again, like I said, and then thinking about some creative ways of completing assignments so that your students can feel motivated. And if that is not something that motivates them, then starting to think about really what can you do and what kind of supports could really be, and resources would help this student. So whether that be resources from your educational facility, or the resources that are online, resources that are from the childmind.org site, any sort of thing of that nature. Okay, but those are some really great questions that we recently received, and I'm very excited to continue to answer more. So please, if you are just now joining in, my name is Catherine Leish, and I'm a clinical social worker at the Child Mind Institute. And today is a talk about goals and motivation during the COVID-19 crisis. And so we started, and sort of the premise of this all was that this is going to be very hard to do. It is not going to be easy, as goal setting was hard before a pandemic. So just hopefully you're able to get a couple things today that will be helpful. But I do have another question. It looks like a question that we've had sent to us before. So please feel free to post more questions. Take a look over our website for some great telehealth resources, some things that we can actually provide, and some services that we're offering at this time. But I'm going to answer a question about that we received earlier. And it says, this feels like it's going on forever. I'm trying to stay motivated and set a positive example for my kids, and that's getting harder and harder. How do I stay motivated when there's no end in sight? This is a question that I think we have received multiple times in various different ways, just because I think there is a lot of anxiety in this uncertainty of the pandemic. And the motivation and goal setting is great, but really what I think is very important is to sort of tune in with yourself. Mindfulness is going to be more than um, more than helpful at this time, I think, when it comes to being more understanding of yourself before you're starting to set these goals. And like I said before, if you were around to hear me, is that when we're thinking of goal setting, we have to really understand where it's coming from. I might do better when I am, for example, my own personal example is that my second language is Spanish. And so when I am seeing a movie that is in Spanish, and there's a word that I'm so fixated on because I don't understand what it means in English, and whatever my understanding is not there, I'm able to feel that I can motivate myself, and I'm going to find this word, I'm going to try to find a way to remember it, something like that, because I want to master my second language. Versus if I am, my goal is to have a really clean house, because clean houses make me feel like I am more so motivated, or I'm feeling really good about myself if I have a clean house. And then some of those tasks are not as great, whereas I was excited to search up a new word in my second language versus now I need to wash the dishes, or now I need to, go ahead and do that laundry that's been sitting there. I'm going to feel less motivated. And so your kids will pick up on these things. Your kids will pick up on sort of your own tactics and how, you can help them as well. So in this, I'm really thinking about scheduling, and how you look at your day can really be a start for feeling like, taking things day by day, but of course looking at your day and seeing how you can incorporate your goals, or sort of those many tasks that will lead you to your long-term goal. So that can include, breaking up your, like I said earlier, breaking up your long-term goals and making them sort of smaller would be great. So that way, if for example, if you and your children are trying to stay motivated and walk every day, right, have a set time, put that in a calendar, put in a reminder in your phone. This time on these days, we're going to take a walk. Sometimes I look at my schedule and I realize, how realistic is it for me to go every day? Probably not as realistic, or not realistic to go at the same time every day. So I look at my schedule. On Mondays, I know I can go at 9 a.m. versus on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, I can go at 10 a.m. So you want to think about that. And that's sort of reminders will really help you and your child understand how to, move forward with any sort of goals. We do have just a couple minutes left now, and so I want to get to this last question. But remember, if I didn't get to your question today, please do reach out to us in the comments. You can ask your question, and we will certainly get to it in a future Facebook Live. But this last question is that my son is eating a lot and sleeping a lot and barely doing anything at all. What can I do to help him regain motivation? And I think in this question, I really hope that the first sort of thing that we can do here is acknowledge the feelings, seeing how, where our children are at, really. Understand and observe patterns of thoughts and behaviors, and of sort of their actions on how they're doing things. And you've already taken note that they are eating too much, or like they are sleeping too much. And so really having an open conversation as far as understanding that. I think a great way for you to get some more insight is definitely reach out to childmind.org/telehealth, and we have a phone number there that you can actually call to get some 30-minute phone consultations. And really through these consultations, we can help with, the treatment of mental health challenges and learning disorders for, your child, your teen, your young adult, in any capacity. In these, we also have some great ways for you to connect with an expert on those behavioral challenges, on even some of those learning challenges, and helping with tutoring coloring and understanding math and reading and things like that. Those consultations can actually be fairly helpful for you to kind of see where do you go next with this, and that can actually help you set a new goal for not only yourself but with your child. Okay. But it looks like we're running out of time, but I do appreciate everyone who joined me today. I hope this was helpful. Remember that we're here every day and that we look through your questions daily as well. The Child Mind Institute is here to help with mental health and parenting needs at this time, no matter where you are. So please do visit us at childmind.org/telehealth to learn more about incredible ways to do remote telehealth therapies and find resources that we have available for your child and your teens and your young adults. I wish you safety and wellness. Thank you again, and have a good Tuesday.